Pan, 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 pan.
Pan, 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 pan.
Hey guys, thanks again for joining us this week on Pan. We hope you enjoyed last week's coverage of Air India's Flight 855.
On this week's show, we're going to take a look at a bonanza crash that happened in Omaha, Nebraska, where the St. Clair family crashed after spending a long weekend at an art fair in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. So let's take off.
Sounds good to me. How's everything looking to you, Rick?
It looks good. Did we get full fuel and oxygen?
Yeah, tanks were topped off and we got both of our oxygen bottles refilled.
And how's the weather looking?
Visibility is pretty much unlimited here. We're gonna have no issues in Santa Fe. Not even a cloud in sight.
And what about in Omaha?
Oh, Napoli, it's not looking too good, but I'll keep an eye on it while we're on our way there.
Okay, we'll just get some updates.
Yeah. If there's any issues with the weather, we'll plan a little diversion back to Manhattan, Kansas to visit Grandma and Grandpa.
Well, that'd be fun.
Yeah, you're telling me. We'll keep that one in our back pocket.
Okay, well, we're all set up for takeoff, so whenever you're ready.
Oh, okay, perfect. Let me just make sure you got everything in the right position here. Alright, perfect. Santa Fe traffic, Sierra India Mike is lining up runway 02 for northeastbound departure, climbing to 13,000. Takeoff power is set.
Looks good.
69 rotate. Positive rate. Flap 0.
We're at 9,000 feet now. Should we put oxygen masks on?
Yeah, that'd be a good idea. Why don't you go ahead and put yours on first, we got sure. Got it on nice and secure. What about you, Marty?
I'm all good.
Good. You need some help back there? Yeah. God. Alright, you wanna grab the controls for me, sweetheart, so I can put mine on?
Yeah, I have it.
Alright, thank you. Okay, I got control.
You got it.
What a beautiful night.
Dad, I think we're all cleared the mountain now. We can descend back to 9,000 feet.
Alright, that's a good idea, sweetheart. Alright, so we're just leveling off here at 9,000 feet. If you want to go ahead and take your oxygen mask off, I'm just going to turn off the system here.
Yeah, no problem.
You mind grabbing the controls for your old back and get it off?
Yeah, I got it.
Oh, you know what? I'm actually feeling a little tired. Do you mind if I take a little half an hour cat nap? Yeah, sure, no problem. I can do this.
You think it'll be okay?
Yeah, the weather was fine here.
Oh, okay. Wake me up in about half an hour or so.
Sure, sounds good. Here, Dad, wake up.
What is it? How long has it been?
Oh, just over an hour.
An hour?
Yeah, the weather was fine, so I thought I'd just give you some extra sleep.
Oh, okay, thanks, Jared.
I think I'm gonna go for a quick nap now. Is that alright?
Yeah, you sure?
Yeah. I'm getting tired. I think I'm gonna move to the back because I can lie down there and it's a lot more comfortable. Mom, you mind switching?
I'll let me switch. Honey?
Just wake me up before we get back to Omaha so I can help you out when we get there.
Yeah, I will, sweetheart. I'll wake you up before the approach.
Honey, you think we should wake up Allison?
Nah, she looks so peaceful back there. I'll fly the approach by myself.
Okay.
Dad, where are we?
We're about 20 nautical miles back from the localizer.
We're that close? I thought you were gonna wake me up so I could help.
You just look so peaceful back there, so I figured I'd fly the approach on my own.
Dad, have you seen our airspeed? We're at the red line.
It's fine.
Dad, what about our wings? We have ice building up.
Roughly Tower of the Sierra India, Mike, approximately 15 nautical miles southwest of the localizer, requesting vector for the approach and any traffic in the area.
Sierra India Mike, vector to the localizer is 050. There is a 727 behind you, but it will not be an issue, so you can slow down.
Roger, 050 and with the traffic. Okay, intercepting the localizer. Brace. Hey guys, so now we're going to take a look at a couple of interviews that were conducted. The first one is going to be with an NTSB investigator, the second with the ATC controller on the night of the accident, and last but not least, the NASA representative.
We were going to discuss the Bonanza crash that happened in Omaha.
Right.
I was just wondering what the NTSB's position is on this accident.
So the NTSB believes that this accident was solely caused by pilot error. Warren St. Clair, who was flying the plane, was flying at excessive speeds and he made aggressive control column movements. This caused severe angles of bank and the plane to pitch nose up. All these things combined overstressed the aircraft to a point where the tail partially separated and ultimately the plane flew into the ground.
Okay. And so, did icing and or turbulence have any effects on the outcome of the flight?
So there were reports of both of those during the time of the accident, but neither can be proven. Allison St. Clair, who was in the plane, said she saw icing while in the air, but when rescue workers showed up at the crash, there was no sign of ice. There were also reports of turbulence, but on any weather charts, there was no turbulence, so this cannot be proven. So, although these would have further aggravated the situation, they cannot be proven.
I see. So, what can you tell us about Mr. Warren St. Clair?
Well, it seems that Mr. St. Clair was very committed to getting home that night. There were reports that he had work the next morning and that he had to be in court since he was a lawyer. There was also the fact that he and his family included were afraid of icing and avoided these situations at all costs. But on this day, he didn't. He flew into icing and stayed in the icing conditions. There were also other traffic conflicts that would have further stressed the situation, and this stress got to him and probably caused the accident.
So what would you say would be the right course of action in this sort of situation?
Well, Mr. St. Clair should have made the decision to divert. When he first encountered icing, he could have turned out of those conditions and flown to their alternate, which had been Manhattan, Kansas, where his in-laws live. And the weather there was much nicer and would have probably had a much or a better landing or an uneventful landing, and they would probably still be with us today.
I see. That was very insightful. Thank you. I think that's all the questions I have. Thanks for coming out tonight. I appreciate it.
I'm here today with the man who's the controller of the night of the devastating Beechcraft Bonanza crash. His name is Bert Stewart. Listen, Bert, I want to thank you for coming in today. Pleasure. Alright, so I'm just going to get straight to it here. First question I have for you. Mr. Stewart, please tell me about your first contact with the Sinclairs that night.
Well, the St. Clairs had followed an IFR flight plan from Santa Fe, so I knew they were on their way. At about 45 miles out, they first showed up on my radar, and at that point I was just waiting for their first call. This call took a lot longer than usual. It got to a point where I almost called them myself, asking if there was anything wrong. But Warren came over the radio, made his usual radio call, and although he did sound unusual, I didn't really have any other concerns.
Okay. So you say that night Warren Sinclair didn't make his initial call until much later than usual, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so just give me a little background here. What kind of prior experience or relationship do you have with the Sinclairs?
Well, the St. Clairs kept their plane at Epley Field. They were always flying. Warren himself flew, his daughter Allison flew, and their son Bob flew as well. So they were always around the airport. Warren himself probably made at least 200 approaches a year, maybe even more. So there were many times when I was working, when I was talking to Warren over the radio, and during this time I got comfortable with him, and he usually followed the same routine. So when I say it was unusual the time he first made his initial call, it's because he didn't make it at the same spot that he usually did.
So, like, did you have any concerns with the way he was flying the airplane, or?
Well, my big concern was his speed. That night there was also a Boeing 727 in the area, and on radar it seemed like they were moving at the same speed, which doesn't make any sense when you consider the speed that a Bonanza flies at and the speed a Boeing 727 flies at. There were multiple times when I told him to slow down, but there didn't seem to be much response.
So, like, did he have any response at all to your warnings about his speed, or did he just leave it blank?
No, like, he responded like he understood what I was saying, like he would respond either Roger or something along those lines, but there was no reaction to it from what I could see. On the radar he seemed to be moving at a constant speed and not making any change to slow down.
Were there any other concerns you had with his flying that day, or just any time in particular?
Like I said before, he likes to follow the same routine, and on that night, he changed another thing, which was where he would intercept the localizer. On that night, he asked for a vector straight to the localizer, which was not his usual routine. He liked to get set up early, so he'd ask to intercept at 3 miles back from the localizer, so he could make a better approach. But for whatever reason, that night he wanted to intercept right at the localizer, and I felt like he was going way too fast to do this, so I suggested that he follow his usual routine, but he didn't agree and asked just for the vector straight to the localizer.
Okay. And at what point did he lose control of the aircraft?
So when he tried to intercept heading at the localizer, he was going way too fast. At that point, he overshot it and tried to make a correction. This seems to be the point when he lost control and the tail had a partial separation. And at that point, he disappeared off my radar display. And then a couple minutes later, I got news that the plane had crashed.
Okay, well, that's it for today, folks. I just want to thank you very much for coming in today. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for coming in today. Please introduce yourself.
It's my pleasure, and of course, my name is Dr. Norman Allen, and I've been working with the Accident Investigation Board at NASA for almost 22 years now.
We value your insight, so please share with us your thoughts surrounding the Beechcraft Bonanza accident in Omaha, Nebraska earlier this week.
Well, to start, having a survivor of an accident is a rare opportunity to get some insights as to the causes and circumstances of the catastrophic event. They are almost always fatal to everyone on board. The fact that Allison Sinclair is also a pilot adds considerably to her ability to qualify what took place. We are deeply grateful to her and her brother for sharing us with every memory, thought, and observation they could, and we are very sorry for the loss.
Of course, such a tough thing to go through. Do you think the accident had anything to do with the type of aircraft? Bonanzas are in the news quite frequently for these sort of events.
Since there's been a substantial amount of publicity about the unusual number of Bonanzas that have suffered catastrophic in-flight failure, the first thought that comes to mind in a case like this is, did the pilot overstress the airplane, or did the airplane simply fall apart on its own? Either possibility raises several other questions. Were there other human, mechanical, and environmental factors that contributed to the breakup? Which then leads to the ultimate question. Can something be done to prevent these killer accidents? Both the FAA and the manufacturer are already working on and have completed airworthiness directives and corrective changes in the aircraft structure as a result of the information gathered from this and several prior accidents. To my knowledge, whatever problem might have formerly existed with Bonanzas has been solved.
So if you don't think the accident was related to mechanical factors, what do you think was the cause?
Our main thought here at NASA is human factors, actions and causes. We know that about 2 hours into the flight, the pilot took a cat nap that turned into a continuous deeper sleep of nearly a full hour. Awakening from that, he was still quite tired, with a heavy head, indicating that his resting position was probably poor, leaving him slightly disoriented and somewhat lightheaded. Then, during the approach, the pilot and his wife made a rather irresponsible decision to let Allison continue sleeping, rather than waking her and getting her back into the right seat to help with the approach. Conditions hadn't changed in Omaha, but the pilot was confident that he would not need any help, even though he had shown signs of mild disorientation. Arriving into Omaha airspace, the pilot was now exhibiting visible stress. His daughter described him as uptight. The airspeed was elevated, there was ice on the wings, and when she asked him why he was flying so close to the red line, his answer was bland. And when she pointed out that there was ice building up, he didn't answer at all. Those are signs of extreme tension in a person who has been described as well-disciplined and cool under pressure. The controller also sensed that something was wrong with the pilot. The Bonanza speed was excessive, the pilot's radio responses weren't completely logical, and his decision to intercept the localizer right at the marker made no sense at all. Then it got worse. He didn't slow down when advised to do so, he never put his flaps down. How could he with his speed up so high? And he didn't lower the gear until he was already into the violent turn that tore the tail loose. Those actions are all definitive signs of a pilot who had lost control of himself and his airplane.
So you're calling it pilot error?
Unfortunately. What took place was a deteriorating mental physical state, aggravated by worsening weather conditions, including unexpected icing, and then further complicated by imagined traffic pressures. That's the formula for an accident such as this one. The pilot definitely overstressed the airplane, and he definitely should have diverted to his alternate the instant the ice showed up. The first questionable decision being to make a 4-hour night flight home, something they had never done before, let alone over a mountain range. The son and daughter emphasized that they were seldom flew cross country at night, not even VFR, yet this was to be IFR and over mountainous terrain. It brings to mind that in situations of temporary declining mental capability, judgment is the first thing to go.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure.
Hello viewers. Today we have a special interview with my co-host Matt Hughes and Allison St. Clair herself. We have her on FaceTime, so let's take a look.
Hey Allison, thanks for joining us today. We're sorry we couldn't make it out to Omaha to talk to you in person, but we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to speak with us. We're terribly sorry for your loss.
Really, it's no problem.
Do you mind briefly walking us through what happened that night?
Dad and Mom never woke me up for the approach into Omaha like they said they would. I guess Dad figured he could handle it okay without my help. I didn't wake until Dad was being given a vector to the outer marker for runway 14 right at Fleet. And the next thing I knew, Dad was trying to intercept the local lagger, but he was going too fast. Something cracked in the back of the plane that sent a shudder right through the cabin. The next thing I remember after that is waking up in the hospital next to my brother.
Just terrible. Was there a reason why your father was going so fast?
I remember the controller telling my father that there was a 727 on approach as well. I guess he just wanted to be extra sure that he would beat them in. Also, when I looked out at the left wing, I could see that it was snowing and that ice was building up on the wing. I told Dad about it, and he just nodded. That's probably another reason why he was flying so fast.
Was your aircraft equipped with any de-icing equipment? Could it handle the conditions you were flying in?
Yes, we had both crop ice and windshield heaters, but no boots. I saw that they were both turned on, but the ice just kept accumulating. My father looked very tense. He could probably feel some mushiness in the controls, and that's why he was redlining it. But my father would never fly into known icing conditions. He had an outright fear of ice, and usually avoided it at all costs. He would have flown to our alternate if he had known the weather at Epping was so bad.
Did you ever consider hypoxia to be a factor?
No, not at all. My father was very conscientious with the use of oxygen. We had our tanks filled just before leaving Santa Fe. We had only found out afterward that the effects of hypoxia can affect you at a much lower altitude at night, especially in the winter months. Me and my brother had searched through all of our old ground school material, and it only briefly mentioned that at night oxygen may be needed at lower altitudes for a sustained flight. Even in the FARs, the content is unclear, though there is somewhat of a broader explanation. But to interpret all of it, to learn that you for sure need oxygen at or above 5,000 feet at night is next to impossible.
Thank you for your time, and I'm very sorry for your loss. Okay guys, so this is the part of the show where we're going to start to wrap things up for you. We're just going to give you our insights on the case and with respect to the communication errors, pilot decision making errors, and the effects that hypoxia had on the pilot during his flight.
Let's examine the communication errors on this flight. First off, Warren failed to communicate the issues that were affecting the flight. We know it is likely that icing and turbulence were affecting the flight. Warren never told the air traffic controller about these issues. Even in the air traffic controller's interview, he never makes any reference to icing and or turbulence. The air traffic controller could have provided assistance to Warren and provided help in getting out of these conditions. The second communication error is that Warren failed to respond to one of air traffic control's calls. The air traffic controller had told Warren that the Boeing 727 behind him wouldn't get any closer than 8 miles, even if he took the extra 3 miles on approach. Warren failed to respond. Any pilot knows that when talking to ATC, you must always reply. Something as simple as Roger would have been more than sufficient in this situation, but Warren failed to do this. The last communication error is the lack of communication inside the plane. Allison makes a comment about ice building up on the wings, and Warren fails to respond. This shows a clear disconnect between Allison and her father, Warren. Let's look at pilot decision making, or the lack thereof. First off, Warren decided not to wake up his daughter, Allison. Warren was a PPL pilot and IFR rated. He had 1,700 hours, so he was very experienced. But his daughter also had a PPL and an IFR rating, and could have helped on this flight. Warren was in a high-stress environment, and if Allison had been in the front, she could have helped him out. She could have, for example, dealt with the radios and relieved some of the workload on Warren himself. She could have also helped with the decision making and maybe made some better ones. Next, Warren continued flight into icing conditions. Warren is described as a pilot who doesn't push his luck. This was especially true when it comes to icing. There are many that describe the St. Clair family as afraid of ice, but on this occasion he flew into the ice and stayed in it, hoping that his prop and windshield de-icing systems would be able to combat the icing. Although we don't know the exact effects of ice on this flight, it could have been avoided. Next, Warren was flying at excessive airspeed. He was flying just below the red line. There are several factors to consider why Warren would be flying so fast. First off, he had ice building up on his wings, and he was trying to avoid a stall. He would also need a higher airspeed so that his flight controls would remain effective with the ice on the wings. But the ice alone would not warrant a pilot to fly so fast. Another factor is the traffic that was in the area. There was a Boeing 727 behind him, and in order to stay ahead, Warren flew at a faster airspeed to make sure that he was first in line to land, which would limit the amount of time he spent in the icing conditions. The next decision that had consequences was the decision to intercept the localizer right at the marker. Warren's usual routine was to intercept the localizer 3 miles out in order to have a better approach, but on this night he decided to intercept right at the outer marker. He was going way too fast, and this caused him to overstress the aircraft and crash it. The decision that would have avoided this catastrophe would have been to fly to an alternate airport. Warren had flown many times to Manhattan, Kansas, which was where his in-laws lived, and even before the flight was thinking about diverting here because of the weather that was forecasted. But he made the decision to go to Eppley Field even with the weather not looking too great. This decision ultimately led to what happened after. The decision to go to his alternate would have been the best decision in this situation. The last bad decision was the choice to fly that night. Warren lacked night flying experience and was only doing it because he had a court date the next day. He should have looked at his experience at night flying, especially cross countries, and made the decision to stay in Santa Fe that day and make the trip home the next day.
Hypoxic hypoxia is the most common form of hypoxia encountered in aviation and is commonly called altitude hypoxia. Pilots may experience hypoxic hypoxia when flying at altitude in an unpressurized aircraft, as is the case with Warren Sinclair. With increasing altitude, the molecules of oxygen in ambient air get further apart and exert less pressure per square inch. The percentage of oxygen does not change as we ascend. However, the partial pressure of oxygen in ambient air decreases as we go to altitude. In other words, with increasing altitude, the partial pressure of oxygen gets lower and the lungs cannot effectively transfer oxygen from the ambient air to the blood to be carried to all the tissues in the body. The effects of hypoxia become particularly noticeable at altitudes of 10,000 feet and up. However, at night, the effects of hypoxia can be experienced at altitudes as low as 5,000 feet. These symptoms, such as the loss of mental judgment and physical dysfunction, would have been significantly increased during the Sinclair's flight from Santa Fe back to Omaha, given that they were flying at night during winter and over mountainous terrain. However, according to the FAR, at cabin pressure altitudes above 12,500 feet MSL up to and including 14,000 feet MSL, supplemental oxygen is only necessary when flying between these altitudes for 30 minutes or longer. Therefore, the Sinclairs were well within the limits at 9,000 feet, since no other restrictions are provided for flying at night. This highlights the flaws in the system that needed to be corrected for safe operation of general aviation aircraft. Okay guys, that sums up everything for this week's show. We hope you enjoyed our take on the Tale of the Lost Tale and that you join us next week.
Thanks for watching.
Fly safe.